So good afternoon to you all. Dr. Daniel Del Monte is our today's guest. Professor, so nice having you here with us. It's a privilege and honor.
Chris and Chris, it's really exciting to be here again.
Chris is always with us, a critical thinker, a data analyst and mentor who is helping us with our effective communication. Hello, Chris.
Hi there. Hello, everyone. Thank you.
Dr. Daniel Del Monte is the author of two works. The first one is called The Logical Worldview, Skills to Distinguish Fact from Fiction in the Contemporary Information War. And the second one is called The Realm of Possibility. This book begins with a terrible tragedy in which a man named Jim loses his daughter Ruth in a car accident. But I'm not going to say more things. This is the book, The Realm of Possibility, by Dr. Daniel Del Monte, which is a very interesting. Dr. Del Monte, would you like to tell us a few things about you?
Classify my book as a form of what's called speculative fiction. Insofar as the characters are not real people, and make up these characters. But it is also speculative. So this would distinguish it from, for instance, like realistic fiction or historical fiction. So realistic fiction would not be true, but it would model real life. Historical fiction would model something in the past, try to recreate some event in the past that really happened. Now, in speculative fiction, I'm using the fictional setting to explore some philosophical idea. This involves fictional characters and they have a drama going on. It's also a vehicle for the reader to think more deeply about, in this case, the nature of time, the nature of what we would call modality. And modality refers to whether something is actual, or whether it is impossible. So things have a different modal status, M-O-D-A-L. And this means, are they actual? So like, I am actual. Now, what is possible could be like a unicorn. A unicorn is not, we don't know for sure, it's not actual, as far as we know. It's possible. And so there's different modal statuses, and my book explores this, these ideas. So let me just give you a quick idea of the plot without giving any spoilers. Cool. Because I do understand that you guys are reading this in your meetup, so I don't want to give any spoilers. So the basic premises of the plot are, there's this individual named Jim. He's an adult male. He's an ordinary guy, nothing particularly distinctive about him. He works at a roofing and siding company, kind of a bleak job in a factory. Life is really centered around his family. And so one day he's kind of nodding off while listening to a baseball game on the radio. And his daughter is out playing with their dog. And unfortunately, there's a car speeding around the corner. The daughter throws a ball into the street, and there's a terrible accident to start the book. So there's this haunting event that lingers in Jim's mind. It kind of shocks the reader in the first couple of chapters. Okay? So as the story progresses, though, Jim starts to get access to of reality. And he gets access to this character, this mysterious character at the factory. His name is Mike, okay? And Mike will introduce Jim to this of reality that I refer to as the realm of possibility, okay? So this is the title of the book, obviously, and in this realm of possibility are not just the world that Jim is in, where he suffers this terrible tragedy, but all the other possible worlds. So he goes into this, it's like a TV room where there's all these different televisions, and they show all the different possible iterations of Jim's life. So there's a possible world where Jim is not nodding off. He's aware of his daughter, and he runs out and rescues her. There's possible worlds where all kinds of different things happen. Whatever is possible, whatever is not logically contradictory could take place in these possible worlds. And Jim finds a way to access them and to redeem his life by accessing them. So it's like he gets into the multiverse. Another term that we might use, the multiverse, all the array of possible worlds. He gets access to it, and he's able to redeem his life through accessing this deeper dimension of reality. That's the basic premise of the book.
Right, so it feels like this central character, Jim, tries to formulate a feeling of sense of the self. It is generally considered that when we suffer consciously, either by a mental illness or pain. So it's nature as a living organism. And we unconsciously receive 3D experiences of our wound through sensory perceptions when we suffer from the outside in. And then we consciously produce, we actively construct and generate a process from the inside out, as if our brain uses its prior expectations. And we do this to somehow control our hallucinations. So it's a kind of perception as a controlled hallucination. So do you think that Jim needs to control and regulate rather than figuring out what's out there? Do you think that experiences are processed in our mind through consciousness in a way to activate it?
This is a very deep question. The mind is processing reality. That's reality manageable. Say that through evolution, we developed an ability to adapt to our environment, and we pay attention to things that matter to us. Pay attention to things that matter to us. So we're getting this very filtered reality that perhaps does not capture the full nature of reality. Very, very filtered, a very limited view of reality that is geared towards our survival. So as you say, we have our senses, we have our concepts. Our concepts are language that filters things to make things more salient and to make our experience meaningful. Okay. Now, should we stay in this box, or should we seek to transcend it? So profound grief leads him to seek to transcend this limited construction of reality. And through this transcendence, access to not just this limited domain of reality, but the domain of possibility, which is much more expansive. So, and there are philosophers who claim that these possible states are not just imaginary, as real as the actual world. And so here's an idea. So even in our limited consciousness, our limited awareness, where we have certain salient things that we focus on, right? We can use what are called counterfactuals, jargon. But what it means is we talk in terms of what would be the case. It's a certain kind of, I guess, a subjunctive mood would be the appropriate term. What would be the case if I were 8 feet tall? Maybe I could compete in professional basketball. If I were old, I would have more wisdom. We can use our minds to access what is the case, what is possibly the case, okay? And these statements, they can be true or false. You can assess them. Hey, if I were 7 feet tall, maybe I could compete in the NBA. We can assess them as true or false. They can be, so if they can be true or false, there must be some reality they correspond. Something out there that is accessible by the mind is not an actual state, possible state. And this goes back to the atomist, like Democritus, the ancient Greeks, the view that there are infinite worlds. They're not causally connected. They're parallel to each other. But there's infinite iterations of me in doing different things, living out different scenarios. And so Jim is having this experience, this limited plane, and accesses an also equally real plane of iterations of himself. And in these other iterations, he finds a solution, at least temporarily, to the horrible loss of his daughter.
Yeah, it seems like Jim tries to heal his wounds, but unsuccessfully. But he tries hard to understand to get acquainted with the pain. He can't get free of his regrets. He constantly feels persecuted, depressed, and we think demented. Is it a feasible thing to reverse engineer the brain by activating consciousness and healing the human soul? I mean, when the scientists try to talk to Jim, they try hard, but in vain. They can't do anything about Jim. It seems as if this is a dead end in the first place.
He's in profound grief. In this genre of speculative fiction, in this genre, suspend your disbelief. The idea is to suspend your disbelief. So actually, Jim does this experience of soul engineering.
Yeah.
So render some of our prejudices, allow the plot to just unfold. Through meeting this guy, Mike, he enters into this parallel universes. Now, is it a pure fantasy? Is it a kind of dementedness? Is Jim just making this up? You could interpret it that way, but like I said, there is a philosophical basis for this. There have been actually documented paranormal experiences. People having these weird experiences. In fact, I learned of like a street in London where there's this notorious, I forget the name of it, but there's this notorious street where people have these time slips. They have reports of a time slip where they see people from a different time. Okay. Or Carl Jung also had, the great psychologist, had this experience where he was in church, he saw these images on the wall, these beautiful paintings, no one else knew they were there. As if he were entering a different time. So what is time? Is time this linear progression? Or the past somehow exist in some or unfamiliar dimension? So let me give a brief discussion of Kant. So I talked before here on Kant, Immanuel Kant. What is time? Kant thinks that time is a form of our experience. Time is the way we perceive reality. We perceive reality as unfolding in moments of time. Okay? Not a structure of reality. It's not the way reality is. The way it appears to us. We see realities unfolding in time. In itself, reality exists as a unity. This is a theological view of the world where you have God, human being. For God, things are present. Past, present, future at once. Reality is on this linear path, moving forward bit by bit. Being that is not limited in this way, it's all there. The landscape of time is all simultaneously present. Of this finite grasp of reality and embracing the mystery of time and what reality is for a being that is not in time. To kind of challenge some of the assumptions we make about the linearity of time and the nature of time. Is it absolute, or is it just the way we perceive things, as Kant would argue? Hopefully that clarifies things or makes things richer for you.
So you have a range of exploratory, philosophical, or perhaps even scientific concepts that are coexisting in this fictional form. You have the very straightforward determinist or compatibilist argument against the idea of some form of ability to influence or be an active agent in the universe in some way, even if it's through the conceit of stepping across the normal bounds of our experience. You have the multiverse. You have the idea that everything, everywhere, all at once, if you like, is happening, and it's our brains that is in fact mediating this into a somewhat linear, limited, and manageable flow of experience, even though what's out there, if there is an out there, if it's not a solipsistic creation, may be something completely different. But the purpose normally behind fiction or storytelling is in effect to explore what you might call the moral or psychological questions that arise from stepping outside the normal bounds of our experience. We go back to Faust and the legend of being able to change what appears to be destiny through making a deal with the devil. We go back to H.G. Wells and the Time Machine and the idea of being able to, in effect, change the tragedies of things that have happened in the past. And we have now some fairly complex iterations of multiverse fiction where people explore multiple versions of ourselves existing in different forms. And you know, we may not be a million miles from some real version of that in terms of our digital downloading, and every time we digitally download or back up ourselves, are we in fact creating a potentially conscious clone that at some point becomes a necessarily real version of ourselves, simply trapped in the moment of its creation, but perhaps through machine learning, able to grow and develop in an entirely different way in the future. And mostly these explorations are to do with how in the real world, in the world that we're actually in, we find a way of coping with the things that we don't really have control about, both in our lives and in the lives of others. We don't choose our genetics. We can't choose whether we're born into a refugee camp or we are born in a particular country. And those times when these events seem to happen randomly, whether or not you believe in randomness or not, we can't choose those either. And I guess the purpose of storytelling through history, through ancient history, through archetypes and so on, has always been to try and offer some insight, some means of navigating this experience of two things happening at once: this feeling that we can influence reality and we are the riders, if you like, in the of our using the Jonathan Haidt argument, we are riding the elephant, let's say, rather than the other way around. Or at the same time, the fact that we are subject to these whims of nature and of chance. So do you feel that you have the answer to this? Do you feel that actually there is a pathway to understanding? Do you feel that the role of fiction, if you like, is to actually allow us to explore these in a playful or way that allows us to heal some of these difficult wounds and questions? Because I'm not sure whether, or perhaps you do think that philosophy or science actually offers some answers to this already. Perhaps we're on the threshold of some mind-boggling discovery.
Yes, I really like the way you express those ideas, and I don't want to give away the plot in this context, but yes, I do have the intention of helping the reader to heal. These events in our lives, some worse than others, of tragedy, of things that are lamentable, that are regrettable. I want this reflection, this book, to be a way for the reader to reframe the way they think about these tragedies. And there's, you know, it is a novel. It's not just about ideas. It's about real people grappling with with pain and loss. The loss of a child, perhaps the most severe grief someone can suffer, a parent losing their own child prematurely. So, excuse me. Okay. Yeah. So, so I don't know if I provide a solution, but I think just reframing and expanding our view of these kind of events is very helpful. So I was thinking of Stoic philosophy and how the idea that much out of our control, and maybe it's God who is assigning the structure of our lives. Maybe it's fate. Maybe it's this impersonal necessity. Maybe it's chance. So God, fate, or chance. These are the three possibilities that Seneca in one of his letters identifies God, fate, or chance as, as larger forces beyond our control that write the story of our lives.
Do you think that? Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. That was a pause. Please continue.
The way to cope with this of being thrown into the world, to use a phrase from Heidegger, right? Of being thrown into the world with God, fate, or chance largely in control of our circumstances, we would release our desire to control. We would change only our attitude. We have control over our attitude, not over the circumstances. And so for the Stoic, there's a surrender to fate. And in this way, you can find solace, that things are working out according to logos, this universal reason built into the fabric of reality, and you can surrender it. Now, is my book recommending that approach? To figure out, I think that actually try to control. They try to gain control. And this is the conceit of the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. This is our period now. We believe we can control nature. We've had great success in molding nature to suit our needs, suit our desires. And my characters don't have this attitude of acceptance. They seek to gain control. So hence the name reversal engineering. It's a very industrialized and scientific, technological approach to these problems.
So that's very interesting. I think the Stoics. Oh, sorry, Demetrius.
Yeah, go on, please.
I was just going to say that the Stoics present perhaps a rather comforting overview of the ups and downs of fate and God and chance, as you said, and perhaps at least an assertion of the essential rightness or shape of our universal existence, which I suppose the history of philosophy through Heidegger and beyond may have taken us to a somewhat colder place. It's easy enough perhaps to accept in the most rigorously determined universe that everything is simply acceptance. Experience happens to us. However, whatever our perception is, our experience of free will is almost certainly an illusion. It's very hard actually to argue against that in any meaningful way, only in the way in which consciousness seems to force us to fight against it. but logically it seems very, very difficult to actually undercut this argument. And so the difficulty in a world where religion has been fairly comprehensively debunked in many ways is that without this idea of transcendent religious realities or metaphysical structures that we only perceive dimly in this Platonic way, this deterministic universe, even if it's potentially an immediately multiplying multiverse of every possible world coexisting, for us as individuals with the limits of our consciousness, it's in effect an extremely nihilistic roller coaster where whatever happens, happens. Nothing is essentially good or bad. Our feelings about it, both positive and negative, are entirely irrational and probably simply a byproduct of inefficient evolutionary processes that are just, let's say, happenstance as part of some other chemical relationships. And I suppose that the challenge is that we can have these moments when, especially, you know, we're looking at ourselves from the neck up and we're very cerebral and being very clever about it. We can accommodate this concept. We can make this exist as something we can contemplate. But it seems that human beings can never really live this way. We are subject to griefs and to the desire to make sense of the world. Let's say a more Nietzschean worldview, that somehow we can stamp our way through the world and become power, and we have access to power. And perhaps this is why religion offers a much more comforting way, and perhaps the ancient Greek philosophies or even the Stoics, which did present a kind of metaphysical framework behind this. How do we navigate this pathway between, let's say, a very modern, cold, matrix-like, code-like view of this world and your warmer, stoical sense of this kind of gentle or Buddhist metaphysical underpinnings that might comfort us a little bit more?
Well, first of all, I wouldn't say my book necessarily promotes a particular metaphysics. I think it could go either way. Here's the basic dichotomy I think that you're getting at. You have logos. Okay, so this is a Greek word, and you find it in the Stoics. You find it in Heraclitus. Okay, and you also find it appropriated in the Christian tradition. You find it in the Gospel of John. So word with a capital W. In the beginning was the word. Okay, so the idea that there's an intelligible order to reality. That what's the reality works according to a rationality. Okay, and the Stoics had this idea, and so if everything is governed by logos, then we can accept the flow of events. Events have a rationality. There's a providential plan. Now, the modern world, to absurdity. So you have logos versus absurdity. And in the absurd world, you get this idea from figures like Albert Camus. The world does not have an intelligible order. Okay? This work clashes with in the world. So we desire meaning, we desire intelligibility, but the world itself does not provide this to us. And so the world is absurd. It's something that makes no sense. It's an absurdity. Between the intelligible order of logos, we find in the Christian tradition, we find it in the Stoics, but also we find the absence of it in this nihilistic view. Now, what does Camus say? We can find meaning through our own struggle. Maybe that's a message from my book. These characters are struggling. The world itself, if there is a multiverse, more meaningful, right? It makes it even less, maybe even less. There's just we're just part of an iteration of repeated universes. It's just an infinite array of universes that it's like a monkey on a typewriter, just banging out different universes, just randomly. We happen to be in one, right? So, but the characters are trying to make sense of. They're using all the means at their disposal to make sense of their existence. So maybe there is the redemption, just like Camus in the myth of Sisyphus, the story of Sisyphus pushing a boulder up the hill again and again and again with no meaning to it. There's no objective, there's no purpose. But the meaning is in the nobility of the human struggle to try to make sense of things. That basic dichotomy, the providential order of logos, and also the absurdity of the modern philosophy. Readers could take different. They'll interpret this book in their own way, but it does penetrate very deeply, I hope.
Yeah, we agree with the basic points of your book, and it seems that the characters never put it down. They seem to get closer and closer to Jim, and Jim seems reluctant in the first place to give in. But the characters, his friends, don't put it down. They try to approach Ruth somehow. So is it a play, a mind game, by passing the source of the problem and activating Jim's subconsciousness through the approach of Ruth?
You could interpret it in different ways. Are these possible worlds? Are they part of the external reality? Or are they just in Jim's mind? Interpretation where there's this, we're accessing only ideas in Jim's mind, fantasies or delusions, hallucinations is a word you used earlier. Or it could be an ontological interpretation where these are actually that he really is actualizing a different possible state. So is Jim in this interior solipsistic tunnel in his own mind, or is he accessing an actual external reality? So that's interesting. I mean, as a psychological novel, Jim's desire to escape reality. So in this context, something that Aquinas says. So Thomas Aquinas has a fascinating passage on whether God can change the past. So the question is, can God change what is already past? Well, God is omnipotent. Yes, God could that have already happened. But Aquinas says actually no. What is past is logically impossible. God can raise someone from the dead. God can overcome natural laws. And God can cure us of sicknesses that have no natural cure. It's a different order. It's something that is impossible. And so you could interpret Jim as taking control. Control is so intense. It's almost like a mind game. Approach would be to find some kind of resolution, to accept what you. It's the serenity prayer, a prayer that people sometimes use to overcome addiction, to accept what you cannot change, rather than reality. The proper approach would be to find some sort of peace with what has happened, rather than embark on what seems to be a futile quest, what seems to be a purely inward, perhaps delusional form of psychological escapism. And the Stoics would certainly recommend making peace with the reality and not trying to change it.
It's fascinating. One of the things that occurred to me actually, which I'd like your opinion on, and this is perhaps something you can comment on as someone first of all living in America and working with young people as a professor, as a teacher. It seems to me that we're living in a time where the ability to, in effect, come to terms with the past and potentially reinvent or go forward with your own life in a different direction, or to heal yourself has been reduced so much. If you think about, perhaps without making too many assumptions, when all of us were young, we may have done many things we regret. We may have got into scrapes and had the odd adventure, none of which was recorded on social media. We may have said something that we shouldn't have said. We may have been influenced by someone we shouldn't have been. We may have wanted to be friends with someone who we later found out was a thoroughly terrible person in one way or another. It seems to me that in the Western world at the moment, at this point, we live in a very unforgiving world where these mistakes, these moments, if you like, that young people have, now live with them for the rest of their lives. They are captured on social media. We're talking about a world where if people like a tweet, or if they appear to sign up for a petition, either for or against any particular political movement, this is held against them and made very public for everyone to see throughout the whole world. It seemed like, it feels to me as though in the past we had this ability to sail away and join the Foreign Legion, or to perhaps, find a new path which enabled us to become this different or better person and engage on a path of healing. What's your experience of that in relation to your work, your connection to young people and the life that people are leading in America at the moment? Do you feel that? Do you think I'm saying anything that you recognise in terms of the world that you live in education at the moment?
Absolutely. So, highly reported, highly surveilled. So absolutely, with social media, it's a highly voyeuristic world, with all like reality TV, a lot of YouTube shows that are meant to be voyeuristic, where you're supposed to just watch people react to something. You play a prank. Like I think of like maybe Mr. Beast. They talk about Mr. Beast. It's very popular.
Yeah.
And it's like giving a bunch of money to people, and then there's a secret hidden camera watching how they react. It's a kind of voyeurism where we have access to somebody's private life. They don't know they're being watched, and we as viewers, we consume it and we like it. We like to watch people and see how they respond, and we think it's funny. Crime investigations where it's like there's these televised sting operations. You watch somebody get caught, and there's a pleasure in the voyeurism. So with social media, the students that I deal with, there's you do something foolish. There's a great possibility it's going to be recorded and permanently part of your record. There's a paradox here, because with also this virtual space, kind of escapism as well, because it's a kind of false life in social media space. Persona. There are people on social media who it's not really who they are. Certain persona it's not who they are. They present it to the world, and persona where someone, I'm going to be a liberal or conservative persona and generate clicks. So it's a false presentation of the self that is enabled on social media. We're not talking to the person directly. We're just seeing a very highly curated version of their life. So this can create a kind of false persona that actually allows students to escape what they really are and what's really happening in their lives. I think of the possibilities of AI and the metaverse. It hasn't really taken off yet. They're still trying to work on this to make it more popular. But it's a whole virtual world where you could have your own avatar and you could actually buy things and own property and interact with other avatars in this virtual space. Foster a kind of escapism where the individual is just physically sitting in a room. They're going to this other world. Quality there of making things more permanent, more surveillance. But also there's also this escapism where you could lose yourself in a virtual reality and have your fantasies met while separating from your real life. So there's two sides to this, I think.
I think from what you've said, I mean, it's an interesting aside, but I think that I'm glad you've written this book, because I think speculative fiction with a philosophical edge is almost the perfect tool through which people can explore these concepts and how to live their lives. And it gives us something that isn't just a window into the past, as you said, but also a reflection on possible futures and the knowledge that we have today. So it sounds like a really interesting read. I'm sorry I haven't made much headway in it yet, and I promise you that I will. I'm going to leave you guys now. I have to go, but I'm really grateful for that, and thank you very much for those thoughts. It sounds really, really fascinating, and I certainly will be recommending this to my network. And hopefully, Dimitris, you will be sharing the details that are available so that people can connect to the book on our channel and find a way to let people know about it.
Yeah, sure. Professor, I would also like to make a short point, if I may. I particularly liked the part where you mentioned that God's omnipotence, and Saint Augustine also says that God could not do anything or create a situation that would make God not God. And as you said, God obeys the laws of logic, and God is eternally logical and cannot perform any evil actions because God is eternally good and logical and unable to violate the laws of logic. So does this also imply in your book that all human problems are also solvable, that can be resolved because of the fact that human beings are made in the image of God? And to what extent can human beings fight back and try to resolve their own problematic situations, let's say? Can they follow a certain pattern? What do you suggest?
Augustine is a great thinker that's also very relevant to my discussion. And also evil. So if there's a good God, evil. This is actually nothing. Evil, because evil is the absence of what is good. God did not create evil because you don't create nothing. So if there's an evil person, like someone could have, an evil person is lacking a, let's say, conscience, or they're lacking self-control, but they have much that is good about them still. They have still the ability to think and to reason and to communicate, and they're still in the image of God. Evil is really nothing, and that God in his eternal wisdom cope with it as somehow working towards the good. It's all part of a larger process. And permitted by God, it's not willed directly by him, it's permitted. And it's permitted for a good reason. So, a view of reality where things are happening for a reason. There will be a triumph of good. Chaos in reality. We have to accept these things, as bad as they may be. So Jim losing his daughter, as bad as that may be, and there must be ongoing hope, the virtue of hope, and there'll be a resolution. So, ideal, but it's hard for people to believe that there will be this resolution. Some people they lose their faith because of evil events like this, and there are movements to try to control reality. I think in particular of the transhumanism philosophy, that we can transcend our human nature and we become immortal. We can download our identity to a cloud and become digital. So yes, this ideal of accepting the wisdom of God, but also there's this desire to control and to do things our way. So, and that's, I think you've touched on the central tension of the book, this tension between God's wisdom and then our desire to control. hear you. I lost audio.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, as we mentioned in the first place, the transformation of the hallucination as a form of uncontrolled perception into a perception which is actually a controlled hallucination. So it all boils down to the human being's capacity to control hallucinations and images around themselves. And I would like to close by reading a very characteristic dialogue in chapter 12 between Mike, the angel of hope, let's say, and Jim, the guy who suffers. So here goes Mike by saying, I'm the good guy, the one who restored your daughter. It's not my fault that restoring Ruth led to other problems, which are evidence that the way the world is set up is faulty. And then Jim goes like, maybe it would have been better if I had just accepted Ruth's death. And then here goes Mike again by saying, oh, I'm fed up with your superstitious fatalism. We have the power and we need to use it. It's just an injury, Jim. Come on. I mean, this dialogue sums up in the best way that effort, the subconscious effort in Jim's mind to, to control his drama. It's unbelievable the way you're writing and you're making these things up. So is there any way that you would like...
Thank you, Dimitros.
Yeah. Is there any way that you would like people to look you up and find more about your work? Do you have any preferred social media or other?
Yes, of course, I'd love for you to purchase the book. You can get it as a paperback or as an ebook. So it's pretty reasonably priced. I think for an ebook, it's only like $4 or so for an ebook. It's on Amazon. So I welcome you to purchase it. And then also I encourage you to follow me on Substack. So if you type in my name, Daniel Del Monte, I have a Substack called Philosophy, Spirituality, and Culture. And on that Substack, 2 times a week, Friday and Sunday, I'll post a reflection. And so if you want to sign up to that, that'd be wonderful. I just two posts a week of about 800 words or so that you can just follow my thinking for that week.
So thanks again, Dr. Del Monte, for being with us today. Dr. Del Monte is the author of the book, The Realm of Possibility, talking about the theme of reverse engineering the past. Thank you very much for being with us today. And we hope to have another online session sometime in the near future. Thank you very much. Have a good evening.